Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and this is Hydrostatic Presents Frostline Lore Panel. Thank you for joining us once again. I am Ashtarothi, and I am joined, as always, by Lockfox and Fyridian. And as we have done before, Fyridian has assembled to us some of the greatest lore experts in EVE Online to discuss the current going-ons within the lore. So, Phi, why don't you jump straight into introducing our panel?
Well, we've got some of our returning panelists. We have Makoto Priano, who is at Makoto Priano on Twitter. He's the CEO of Itsukame-Zainou and one of the coordinators of a drifter fighting group. He's also a member of the Tweetfleet Slack lore community, a role player, and an explorer. And as always, he wants to remind you that IKAME is recruiting. We have Mark726, or at Web Spaceships on Twitter. He's the author of EVE Travel and the EVE Lore Survival Guide. He is also an explorer, currently hanging out in Wormhole Space, and he is a general lore hanger-on. He wanted me to tell you that. We also have Morwen Lagann returning, at Morwen Lagann on Twitter. He's the CEO of Tyrathlion Interstellar and another coordinator of the drifter fighting consortium that Makoto is part of. He is also an explorer and a role player, and he is a moderator for a number of role player hangouts, including the Backstage forum. He's easily found lurking or even participating in the lore or roleplay channels on Tweetfleet Slack. And returning also, we have Uriel Anteovnuecci, who is a go-to guy for Jove-related things at JLAB Corporation. He is a role player, seriously into the current storyline, and eagerly waiting on the upcoming Society of Conscious Thought chronicle. He can be found dredging the game files for juicy new stuff or brainstorming one theory or another in the lore channel on Slack. And then we have one new member. We have Elizabeth, who is the Holy Mother of the Order of Jamil, an Amar role player and lore expert, and a goon. She also writes for thematani.com.
All right, thank you very much. We actually have a smaller panel today, but we wanted to make sure to give it to you guys at this time so that way EU and US people can both enjoy it. And also, we definitely have no shortage of content. So, should we jump right in, or do you have any housekeeping for us? Well, okay, I guess I'll just jump into it. So there is one piece of housekeeping, which is that we have, or I have this week, released the lore update, which should function as kind of an in-between for these larger lore panels. Sometimes it is hard to get everybody together and, do these things frequently. So we want to, once we have about 2 or 3 events, we'll be putting out more lore updates. The first one was put out this week. It was very successful. We went over the Frostline events, Liz's new writing, and cloning and death clones and jump clones. So expect to see that more on hydrostaticeve.com. So that's about it for housekeeping. So we will start off the way that we start off all of our shows, with a question for the panel. And we'll just go straight down the list. The question will be, what is your favorite past CCP gift item? Now, we know that CCP is giving out holiday gifts this season, but I have disqualified those. So what is your favorite past gift item? This doesn't have to be a Christmas item. It could be anything that's just been given out by CCP in the past. So why don't we start with Lockfox? Never mind. Why don't we start with Fyridian?
My favorite one definitely has to be the friendship, because, as we all know, the best ship in EVE is friendship, and it's nice to have a little memento of that.
I forgot that Lockfox isn't actually, he's just the camera guy today. So I will go next. My favorite is, actually I won't go next because I just forgot what it is. So Makoto, what do you got?
I would have to say that my favorite is definitely the Victoria yacht. I mean, it's the yacht. How can you not love it?
Right. Those yachts are pretty cool. Like, I went for months without realizing what they really were, and then once I started playing with it, I was like, this is amazing. Uriel?
Let's see. I'll say, I do like the yacht, but I'll also say I like the Leopard, because that's a pretty fun little ship, and when it came out shortly after the Interceptors got their speed boost and warp stuff was redone, it just basically blinks around the system. So that was always fun.
It was definitely a really good opportunity to show off the new warp speed mechanics. Mark, what do you got?
Oh, my favorite was the little mini monolith trinket that we got a year or two back. I just enjoyed the little shout out to an Easter egg that has been much beloved by many.
Yep, that was definitely a pretty cool one. So, Liz, what do you got?
Well, I don't know if it counts as a gift, but the Blood Raider Cerebral Accelerator, which let me get in some much-needed skill before the MR trial started.
It's a little bit cheating, but I'll let it slide. It was basically free by the end of it. I remember what mine is. Mine is definitely the festival launchers. I know that there was a big deal that there was the festival launchers back in the day, and then it didn't really work out because they're afraid of people tricking other people into engaging when they weren't supposed to. And so once they were able to put in the safety system, they were also able to put back in the festival launchers. And I think that they have contributed very nicely to kind of the more fun players of EVE, such as Signal Cartel, who are just in there to enjoy it with their hug fleets. I think it's pretty amazing. But let's finish this up with Morwen. What is your favorite gift?
Well, it's not really an item, but the bonus remaps were kind of nice. If you really want an item, boots.ini, because, yeah, I was there for that. I was a victim of that. So that was actually a really cute item for them to put in just to point back and laugh at it.
The boots.ini is pretty cool. In fact, I'm pretty sure those are the boots that I'm still wearing.
I was wearing them for a very long time until I found others that went better with the outfit, so...
By the way, I just want to point out how funny it is that you actually changed your boots because it matches the outfit more, even though nobody ever sees it.
Yeah, well...
All right. Well, sorry, what?
Space Barbie.
Exactly. All right, so we got a lot of stuff to cover, so let's just jump straight into this. The first topic of the day is we actually did get a new chronicle. Some of this stuff is not going to be like bleeding edge new. It's been almost 3 months, I think, since our last lore panel, so we're covering everything since then. So the first thing that we got to cover is the new chronicle called Testament, which brought us up to date with the Order of Saint Tetramon. And I have a note here that says that Liz has something important to say about that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the new chronicle Testament?
Okay, so it's basically to tie up some loose ends in the MR storyline. As far as I can tell, basically the key points to this is it's Jamil's will, which is designed to explain why King Canid is in the secession trials, and more importantly, that he's not going to be able to wiggle out of it, that he's going to wind up dead. So the whole point is that there's this religious order called the Order of Saint Tetramon, which has been in game for a while, and they date back a really long time. Their official stated purpose is to maintain the Amar scriptures in their pure true form. I don't know how in deep you want me to go because this can kind of get very deep.
No, go for it.
Okay, so the Amar scriptures are basically living scriptures, so they get changed every so often when new information comes around, or the people in charge decide that it's better that way. So the Order of Saint Tetramon was kind of takes this kind of strict constructionist, non-changing view of scriptures, which is a little different, which kind of got them in trouble. They were suppressed, and they wound up living in the Canid Kingdom for a long while, and there are a few periods where they were kind of allowed to come back, usually in times of need. For example, they came back during the Mimitar Rebellion, I think, and they also came back early on in the game, and then they were suppressed again.
So the actual events of the Testament Chronicle, we actually talked about in our, I want to say, last episode of Hydrostatic podcast. It was our Know Your Lore, either the one last or the one before. I'm pretty sure it was the one with Elise. So I think that makes it the last one. But so you talked about how it was her will and that basically her objective was to make sure that Canid was part of the succession trials and died. Now that's a pretty gnarly dying wish, effectively. What would cause that to be that way?
If you look at it from the point of her wanting to really reunify the Empire and bring the Canid Kingdom back firmly into the fold, since when Canid rebelled, it split off the Empire, which was a pretty big deal. So
it was a civil war almost.
Well, yeah, kind of, sort of, but it never really developed into anything because Emperor, God, I'm going to slaughter this pronunciation because it's a Marsh and I'm bad at pronunciation. Hydran, yeah. The 7th basically realized he couldn't do anything about it. So there's no civil war, but there was always this kind of tension. So if you look at Jamil's primary goal as to reunify the Empire and bring the kingdom back into the fold, then it makes perfect sense, because to do that you really have to get rid of King Canid, because there's a lot of pent-up energy still built, hatred into him. So if he loses his succession trials and he dies, that is beneficial to effecting this reunification. The catch is making sure that if he does lose, which he did already, he's not given a chance to run away. So she basically picked this third-party group that had ties to the Canid Kingdom, because that's where they lived, but weren't specifically Canid loyalist, to hold these the heirs sequestered while the trials are going on, and then to ensure that when the time came, they committed suicide. I can't pronounce it.
Shathelson.
There we go. My tongue is tied today. I'm sorry.
That's all right. So is it possible that Jamil just picked the only political target that was more controversial than she was?
I'm not totally sure that's the case. I mean, I don't think that's exactly the case. I think it's more of picking a third party that could definitely be trusted by all sides.
All right, so you said that the Order of Saint Tetramon has been in exile, and this basically brings them back. Do you have any suspicions about like the long-lasting consequences of them being brought back, or how is the Amar that is left behind feel about Saint Tetramon? Do you think that they're going to have a nice warm reunion after this is all over?
Well, St. Tetramon's been back before, and they've been suppressed again. So that's happened a couple of times, as from my quick reading of the lore. So the fact that they're back right now doesn't necessarily mean that they're back for good. The next emperor or empress is not bound to let that state of affairs remain. If they are back for good, it's not exactly sure what their effect will be in terms of how much power they have, because we don't know the full contents of Jamil's will.
Right. So basically what you're saying is that the future of Saint Tetramon past the succession trials hinges directly on the victor of the succession trials.
It will depend on that. It will also depend on how the Empire is. And they also fight for the Empire. They're not just a bunch of book people. When the Mimitar were invading during the events of the Empyrean Age era, the Saint Tetramon was preparing to fight in defense of the Empire. So, given the fact that Amar is currently at war with not only the Mimitar Republic and the Galente Federation, the faction war, they also have the Drifters to deal with. It's not likely that people are going to be turning away military help right away.
Well, I guess that's a good enough reason as any to move on to the succession trials and talk about the heirs that have been eliminated and the heirs that continue to be in the race. So you've already talked a little bit about King Canid. I'm not sure if we've ever really gone into him on a lore panel before. So why don't you give like the 2-minute breakdown of who King Canid is and what his shtick is?
Okay, 2 minutes. King Canid was the heir for one of the big 5 heirs after the moral reforms. He lost in the succession trials to Emperor Hadrian the Seventh, decided he didn't want to die, and ran away. And
it's worth noting that this was nearly 200 years ago, right?
300 years ago. The timeline gets a little weird, and it's even internally there's some huge inconsistencies. Some say 300 years, some say more. So more than 300 years ago, he ran away, and he took about half the empire's military with him, made his own little kingdom, and did his own thing. Since then, he's been brutally repressing his own people to try and stay in power. All of his family members, anybody that could potentially cause trouble, has a family member that is held hostage in Canid's palace. So, pure dictator stuff there. He was declared a heretic, and he was struck from the Book of Records, which is the Mar version of being excommunicated, only worse. And yeah, so recently he came back into favor with Jamil, who she brought him in as a balancing force to Ardishapur, politically speaking. And then in her last will and testament, she made him an heir again, completely. So yeah, that's him in a nutshell.
All right, so very, very controversial figure. Thankfully, he, I guess, is going to die. So what do you know what happens to him? What is his heirs like?
Okay, his heir is kind of weird. His heir is pretty much guaranteed to be a clone of him.
Well,
Okay, so the tinfoil theory is that the heir is a clone. The
resemblances are striking, shall we say?
yes, but then again, all Trumar look alike, at least the men. So
anyway, so it's pretty widely suspected that King Canid is heavily into cloning, which is in contradiction of Amar religious law for heirs, but he does it anyway because he is in fact a heretic. And
funny that you would be quick to brand a clone person a heretic.
Jamil was not a clone; she was brought back by God. Thank you.
Sure.
Boo!
Anyway, a clone can't be the Empress. She was the Empress, so she can't be a clone. It seems pretty simple to me. So yeah, he was pretty big on cloning, and so the theory is that his heir is also a clone. The fact that Mercury put that line in there that despite his advanced age, Farak appears to share his with his sovereign cousin the Canid family trait of responding well to gentrological implants, and has aged very handsomely indeed, and is, pretty much the same in terms of looks, is one of those pretty strong hints from the storyline team. Nothing you can take to the bank, but it's a pretty strong hint. So.
Well, okay. That's cool. So basically, Canid is going to die, but might be a clone.
Pretty much. So if you're in the Canid Kingdom, it's meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
So, would that fly? Wouldn't they eventually figure out that he's a clone? Don't they do tests? Do they ever do tests against sacred flesh, or would he just be fine as the heir?
The people that could really test him are not in a real position to do so. The speakers of truth are the only people that can really lay down against an heir, and I do not believe have power in the kingdom. So yeah, it's
there's a funny aspect to all this that we haven't even mentioned yet, and that's that the new king, his wife is not even true Amar or Canid. She's Nikuni, and she's the commanding officer of the entire Royal Canid Navy.
She's what now?
She is in charge of.
No, she's
the Royal
Yukuni?
Canid Navy. Nikuni, yes.
Nikuni. What is that in relationship as opposed to true Amar?
It's the other bloodline type for the Amar. They are from the Iridia region on the planet Nishi 4, I think. It was originally a very desert world, so I guess think Dune. And they're mostly fully reclaimed at this point. There's still some that are in slavery, but by and large they are mostly commoners and freedmen. And have their own and are basically able to do their own thing. But it's not like we're going to talk about Katiz in a little bit, but it's worth noting that basically the wife of the new king is neither True Amar nor of the Canid bloodline. They are actually one of the lesser bloodlines. So,
and that was all based on political power of
yes.
of making sure that the admiral of their navy could not turn around and effect some sort of coup.
Yeah.
All right. So, and then finally, there's one other piece of controversy within the within Canid that I know of, which is that he actually selected a Blood Raider as one of his champions.
Edity was kind of an interesting case. There was some brouhaha made by the MR role players about that. I mean, Edity's never really tried to hide it. Unfortunately, the lore answer we got was, shut up and go away and leave us alone. So I'm not really sure on how to really comment on the lore aspect of it, other than it happened, and we're not really sure why.
Well, they did specifically say that your affiliations might matter to some of the heirs, so
they
there
did
is
say
reason
that.
to suspect it.
They did say that, and so you can look at Canid as either choosing Edity as some sort of like massive troll, because in a few chronicles we kind of get an insight into his character and that he takes fun about, mocking other people, specifically Ardishapur. So you can look at it like that. You can also look at Canid as somebody that really wants to live and doesn't care much about the religion, which keeps in well with his past. And if he truly thought that Edity had a better chance of winning than any of the other champions, he would take it. The bigger question is why Edity was accepted by the, Theology Council and the Privy Council, which is, we're not sure.
Well, it's likely that he was a big reason why the rules against Blood Raider skins was added to the fight.
There was not only that, but there was also prohibitions against role-playing, collecting, bodies or blood samples or anything else of the sort.
Right. All right, so that's about enough of Canid. There's plenty of other heirs to talk about, so let's move on to Ardishapur. You've mentioned them a few times so far, so what about the heir to House Ardishapur?
The heir to House Ardishapur actually came up in lore well before he was named heir. He's one of the few ones that wasn't freshly made for this. He's Giannis Ardishapur's nephew. Giannis has not married, has no children. So Ardishapur are pretty much the solidly religious house of the Amar Empire, and that says something when you're living in a theocracy, when a one particular house is more religious than the rest. So Aram seems to be pretty much the favor of his uncle, kind of like Merimith Sarum was a little bit. But yeah, so most of the time he's a book guy, kind of this scholar person, and but lately he has been attending Privy Council for his uncle, so he's gotten some exposure into Amar politics. And then when the secession trials were called, he was named heir.
All right, so the Ardishapur are very much they're not zealotous, but they are religious, faithful.
You could call them zealotous. I think zealotous is fair. Some of them more zealotous than others.
Right, and I do know that Ardishapur was one of the kind of, maybe not thorn in Jamil's side, but she considered them to be a high consideration in her political moves.
Yes, that's definitely the case. She gave Ardishapur the mandate in an attempt to kind of bog him down politically and make him spend resources to modernize the mandate. And by all accounts, Ardishapur actually did amazingly well at that, better than anyone could have really expected. So that kind of backfired on Jamil, which can kind of explain why she's kind of brought Canid more into the fold to kind of balance that.
Right. Okay, so then what about House Kador?
Okay, so Orium Kador is pretty much an idiot, and nobody's really going to mourn his passing. Even the Kadorites are not going to mourn his passing. So
Military experts are calling this a sinusoidal field.
yes, military experts
Right.
are calling this. So he's the one that launched his own little personal invasion of Solitude, which turned out horribly. Jamil Sarum took away the house fleet, so all the Amarian great houses, the big five, kind of have their own fleets, which are not allowed to be used offensively, as per a decree in 2000 in YC 105. So he was not very popular, and that was kind of disgraceful. So she is
Well, to
Hamida.
put it into perspective, it's basically it would be basically the equivalent of the Lannister family just invading Dorne, and then the king slapping them and taking away their bannermen.
Yeah. Or if you're not a Game of Thrones fan, think the governor of Texas sending in the National Guard to Mexico. Similar idea. So Hamida is the new heir. She is kind of this doctor figure. And she's actually the only other heir among the big five, not counting Canid, that wasn't kind of this outcast. So she's been within the family for the whole time. So
wait, sorry. When you say new heir, you're saying the one that will take over when the one who is currently heir dies? Okay.
Yeah, so she's going to replace Uriel Kador. So Uriel Kador, there's not a lot on Uriel Kador other than his whole invasion of Solitude, and he is Kadorian. So, I mean, it's pretty boring to talk about Uriel Kador. But his new heir is definitely going to be interesting. She's a little younger, and she also has been working on rebuilding the Kador fleet. And yeah, she seems to be pretty on the ball, and compared to Uriel, is a good change for House Kador.
All right. Moving right along. And also, the controversial thing in the House Kador was, of course, that Max Singularity, first of his name, was chosen as the heir, or as one of the competitors for House Kador. Obviously, he lost, which makes it not very much of a lore impact. But man, would that have been interesting if he got any amount of traction. He was an excellent. He did an excellent job, by the way, for being a gracious combatant and a gracious loser. He did. I was really pleased with his performance.
So slight side note: two of the team members I'm actually have been in corps with in CFC Imperium, Lazarus, and then Fairy Red, who was on an alt that I don't remember the name of. But yeah, so I was talking with them, and it was very they showed some consummate sportsmanship in what happened with that bug. I'm not sure I would have been as sportsmanlike as they were, to be completely honest. But
for those of you who do not know, during the Alliance tournament, or during the Amar Championship, every house had kind of their own rules. By the rules, the Magnate was a valid ship. The Max was going to fly a comp in which he was in a Magnate. However, at the last second, there was discovered to be a bug, which made it so that basically, if they flew the Magnate, the tournament system would automatically just register it as a failure because the Magnate wasn't in their system correctly. They had fixed that, but unfortunately, it made it so that they had to change comps at the last second. They were offered an opportunity to do a rematch, which Max politely declined.
And it's not just that CCP eventually offered one. CCP didn't offer one until after the opposing team had said, we would like to offer to redo this if this is okay.
Yeah.
Right.
It was the
sportsmanship
other team said it first.
The sportsmanship throughout the championship was amazing.
Yeah, I cannot argue with that.
Yeah.
It's well done.
Yeah.
All right, we've delayed this long enough. On to your favorite house, House Sarum.
House Sarum. Okay, so the current heir is Merimeth. He unfortunately is not long for this world. Merimeth was Jamil's nephew and was pretty much looked to her as a mother. And he grew up kind of on the intelligence side of the bit, worked for the MIO, which is unusual since most of Sarum is very heavy military focused. So the new heir for Sarum is Arak Sarum, named after the emperor of the same name, which is in the Amar faction warfare ranks. And he's the first of the heirs, there's 3 of them, that basically came from this kind of outcast part of the family that were re-welcomed into the fold. So Eric's mother was the Duchess of Mekios, who was kind of exiled by Jamil's father, Merrick Sarum. I think I'm getting that right, but it was so.
Not necessarily Jamil's father, but he was the patriarch of the branch from which Jamil is from.
I think
I'm reading the article right now.
Yeah, I know the article, but I'm pretty sure that's her father. The issue is the timeline that Tony G presents in Templar 1 is all messed up compared to everything. But so anyway, so he was kind of exiled, and then he wound up joining the Sarum fleet, became an admiral, did very well, and then kind of got back into the family once Jamil was in charge of it. He was later named the Kilzel A Sani, which means Sword of the Blood, which is basically the title that is given to the heir presumptive for House Sarum. So Sarum again is going to have a very military-oriented heir after this current crop commits Sathelson.
Which fits since Sarum is generally
Yes.
considered to be the militaristic house in the Amar Empire. So
Yep,
very much.
Yeah. They are the ones who vie for a military reclaiming.
Right. Okay. So, and then I don't think that there's very much controversy in the decisions, or there was nothing really to read into the decisions of the House heirs for House Sarum, except for to say that our very own Liz did a fantastic job piloting during that.
Sadly, not good enough, but
it's only because somebody else banned the Guardian.
Yeah, they banned the Logic.
We all know.
You did a fantastic job. It just wasn't the will of God. That's all.
We can accept that. Yes.
All right. So now then, we've covered all of the losers. Now it's on to the winners. So as of right now, we have 2 people who are still eligible to be the Emperor. We have the heir of House Corazor and the heir of House Tash-Murkon. So let's dig in here. Let's talk about the heir of Corazor.
Okay, so Corazor.
Batman.
You want to go, Morwen, or you want me to go?
No, I just had to say Batman because
Batman. Okay.
That's literally what it says in the show
Batmar.
notes. Batman remains Batman.
Amari.
Yep, that's all we have
All right.
about him.
Right.
All right, go on.
Okay,
Sorry.
so Corazor. He's one of the more fleshed out heirs because he has a very, very colorful background. Basically, he was insane. And I don't mean just kind of off his rocker, I mean batshit insane. So he was the son of Emperor Dorim II, who was, by all accounts, a very good emperor. He didn't rule for very long, but nice guy, who flatly refused to believe that his son could do any wrong, kind of like if you've all ever... Everybody knows that. The parents is like, oh, my kid is a perfect kid. There's absolutely no way they would be shoplifting. Well, he did a little bit worse than shoplifting. It looks like somebody was reading the Old Testament, decided to take the best of Solomon and David, or the worst of Solomon and David, and then add more. So he's got babies cut in half, making girls dance naked, killing husbands, torturing children, etc., etc., etc. And basically people kind of had enough, but his father was the emperor, so there's not much you can do in that case. So the Speakers of Truth, which is a very powerful ancient Amarian religious organization, which was founded by the Council of Apostles to kind of put a check on the emperor, but that's kind of like not there anymore since the moral reforms. But they still have a lot of power. Per scripture, showed up. Speaker Joshua basically judged him and said, everybody is getting their pound of flesh, but because you're an heir and they're a commoner, it's going to be an ounce of flesh. Well, they didn't want to kill him, but they had to do a lot. So there was basically this cutting of flesh, sending it out to people, and then using a cellular regenerator to heal them back up, and then repeating the process. So apparently the torture did well for him, because he's no longer an evil, insane person. Even though he still likes to operate outside the rules, he's now more Batman, fighting corruption a bit more directly. There's one particular chronicle where it's alluded to that he beats a governor to death, a corrupt governor to death. So, yeah.
With the Kumok.
With a Kumok. So people don't know what a Kumok is. A Kumok is the same thing that was used to assassinate Arkham Ardishapur, and which led to Starkman Prime getting... I'm getting deeper into the... Anyway, so Kumok's this club that Mimitar used sometime. And
It's basically
it's a symbolic weapon.
It's a symbolic weapon that is banned in the Empire because it was used during the Starkman uprising.
Yes.
And so basically the local governor happened to have one in his office for whatever reason, and this governor was particularly corrupt. So Aritzio basically locked the door behind him when he went in to go have a chat and beat the guy to death with it.
Yeah. So also politically speaking, it's worth noting that Aritzio, I can't pronounce words today. I don't know why. Anyway, so Lord Corazor was one of Empress Jamil's pretty strongest supporters. He was named the Chancellor of the Privy Council, and he was the only heir to really make a firm statement that his champions had to be Gemilites. They had to be strong supporters of Empress Jamil. So that's kind of interesting and telling, and so we'll see how that turns out for him. His heir, the new Corazor heir, is Arcilia Corazor, who is the cousin of Aritzio, and she was also one of the people that Aritzio kind of screwed over, married her off to this holder in the middle of nowhere. She was kind of away from the family, but then when Aritzio was healed up, was kind of welcomed back. So
if I can speak first, they've got this real interesting dynamic basically too, like reading on the page for her, because all the heirs each have a really detailed EveWiki article now. So basically she's just like, well, why are you being so nice to me? Like, I get that you're being nice, but I don't trust you still. And that's like the whole thing between them.
yeah,
I don't really believe you've changed, so I'm just going to watch you carefully and not say no to a gift horse. Or not look a gift horse in the mouth.
By the way, do you know where that expression comes from?
check the
Are we
horses.
going to have a linguistic lesson?
I'll tell you later. All right, so okay, so that is Corazor. So now on to Tash-Murkon.
Okay, if I was putting money on the trials, which I'm not, but if I was, I'd be putting on Tash-Murkon, because Kellen Darklight beat the crap out of us and everyone else 5 times. So so Tash-Murkon has 2 interesting things going on for her. The first one is kind of in character in the lore, and the second one is kind of this out of character meta consideration. We'll do the in character first. In character is she's got Eudorian blood in her, which is kind of a big deal because the scriptures say pretty clearly that the true Amar stand above everyone else. Well, the true Amar conquered Amar Prime 7,000 years ago, and there was 2 other races on Amar Prime. There was the Canid and there was the Eudorians. The Eudorians don't really exist as a distinct subset anymore. They pretty much committed cultural and genetic suicide by heavily intermingling and marrying with true Amar. In fact, according to Amar law, there's really no Eudorian subset. It's pretty much all true Amar, because anyone that would be classified as Eudorian has so much true Amar blood in them. They're true Amar. The catch is that the emperor is or empress is the highest person in the entire Mar Empire, so therefore they have to be the most holy. The point of that is that God's basically working through them, and it makes the empire function. So having an heir that does have Eudorian blood calls some sort of question onto their legitimacy. Probably not enough legitimacy to really derail anything, but there's enough of a looking askance at the situation.
Now, wait. Why would they have a system in which an heir could be invalid to be the agent of God? Like, wouldn't all Tash-Murkons be Eudorian? It's hereditary, right?
No. That's not the point. The point is that if you have become emperor or empress, that means that you are.
Yeah.
Right, but what I'm saying is that if all of Tash-Murkon are Eudorian, then how are they heirs?
They're not.
See, they're not. They have Eudorian blood.
Yeah, Katiz's family has Eudorian blood in them, and I'm not entirely sure why CCP decided to make a thing about it, because if, as the lore says, so many true Amar have a bit of Eudorian ancestry in them that, and it's, at this point so small that it's not worth even noting on the census, then it begs the question of, well, why make a mention of it at all? Is it that she has more in her than, the average? Or is it just that it's something that, she uses as a political cudgel, for whatever reason?
It's more to the fact that... Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, I think it was... I was always under the impression, someone please correct me if I'm wrong, that it was all more like... it was a scramble to resolve what happened after Canid left the kingdom, and so they were looking for the next house that had the most power in it, and it happened to be Eudorian.
Right, okay.
Right,
so
my understanding is that they bought their way in effectively.
That is the thing. Tash-Murkon are very rich. They're not Eudorian. They're true Amar with Eudorian heritage somewhere in their bloodline, which is really the issue. The only reason people make a huge deal out of Tash-Murkon is because they're now an heir. So people are using that as a political kind of tool where you probably wouldn't see that if it was any other position in the Empire. But because they're an heir, they're so high up that they get examined by a microscope. It's like running for president. People look at what you wrote, on your college thesis or some weird crap like that. So it's more of they're so high up that people have examined them minutely.
I think that the bigger key is just that they are the newest family to be considered heirs, right? They're still being kind of processed.
They are the newest family to be considered heirs. There's have not been a Tash-Murkon emperor. They are fantastically wealthy. More to the point, Kadis is fantastically wealthy on her own merits, not just because of the house. See, the houses have a lot of money, but Kadis has a lot of her own money. So combine that with her house power, and you have some pretty amazing assets going on.
She's the most individually wealthy person in the cluster, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm trying to remember exactly. She's somewhere in the ranks of like the fourth or something like that, and I think that includes like actual empires. She may be richer
Something
than one or two of the empires.
So Tash-Murkon, more broadly speaking, they're a lot more liberal than somebody like Ardishapur would be. Now, liberal in the Amar Empire doesn't mean what liberal anywhere else does. Liberal in the Amar Empire is... Conservative in the Amar Empire is you whip your slaves so that they become closer to God. Liberal in the Amar Empire is that you give your slaves drugs so they work better. Or transcranial microcontrollers. So when we say they're liberal, what we really mean is that they take this kind of broader view of scripture in terms of making things work smoothly, and they're more likely to ignore some of the more stringent, strict points. Not that
they sound more lawful evil than lawful good.
Yeah, Tash-Murkon in particular, actually. I remember reading that within her groups and everything, you don't necessarily have to be Minmatar or anything specific to be a slave. Like anyone who isn't, I should just link it later. I'm having a hard time explaining things.
The deal with slavery in Amar is that the Minmatar are generally still enslaved. There's also the Eolor that are still generally enslaved. There's some Nikunu bloodlines that are still enslaved. And slavery is also a thing that they hand out if you break the law. It's a criminal punishment as well. It's also theorized that there are people who will sell themselves into slavery to cover debts. You saw that with the Roman Empire. There's no official lore backing it, but there's this belief that it probably makes sense. So it's probably more believable that the Tash-Murkon would be more accepting of those other kinds of bloodlines as servants.
Right. Makoto, did you have something else to contribute?
Yeah, I just want to say that the tie to slavery in the Roman Empire is a fairly apt one, in that you have acquisition of slaves through conquest, and it's irrespective of race. Attempting a slavery corollary with the South in the U.S. or that type of thing, it doesn't really work. So
absolutely
remember,
not.
it's a much historical slavery, which was irrespective of race.
Yeah. And the other thing about Tash-Murkon and their liberal is they're very willing to work with other empires to make things work, like working with Quaif and working with giving loans to the Caldari. So we're actually likely to see some more globalization within the Emmar Empire, reaching out to other empires to facilitate trade and diplomacy.
All right, so let's wrap this up by just simply asking a question, and anybody in the panel can answer it if you want, and we can give conflicting theories if we want to. But let's just say, all things being the same, what does the Empire look like in 2 years after being, if Tash-Murkon wins versus Corazor? So let's start with Corazor. What does the Empire look like in 2 years if Corazor becomes Emperor?
I'll say, well, based on any knowledge I have, Corazor, things probably won't change too much. Maybe a little more, like was said already, globalization, more interconnected with other empires. But
that would be Tash-Murkon, right?
No,
it'd be both of them, really.
Yeah, Corazor's very, very liberal.
Yeah.
He's very, he's more likely to go for diplomatic solutions when possible, as opposed to the ones that are dead. I mean, Katiz is also on the liberal end of the spectrum, so we're probably going to see that regardless. But I think that Corazor's method of diplomacy would be less economic and more, I guess, social.
Yeah.
I also see, if Corazor wins, I see a lot more power being concentrated in the position of Emperor, and then the Emperor family and the other branches of the Imperial government, as opposed to more where you would see more power in the feudal lords. So that could cause some issues. It has in the past.
Corazor will be the emperor the empire deserves, not the one it needs.
Okay, so
make that joke.
So Emperor.
Just to say, I just wanted to say, at least in my opinion, and it seems pretty likely, either of them will do well as Emperor/Empress. But that being said, I certainly hope Corazor wins, having fought for him.
All right, and follow-up question to that. Emperor Corazor is crowned the new emperor. What is his approach to the Drifter threat?
Kill it.
If it explodes, we can kill it.
Yeah, I don't.
Very well.
I don't think on the realm of the Drifter threat, I don't think you're going to see any Emmar Emperor Empress automatically start sending out diplomatic ties.
I didn't say I wasn't suggesting that, but I mean, like, is there a difference in how they would operate?
I would think, that maybe at the very least they'd look more into finding things out about them than before, instead of, straight up just destruction immediately. That said, we have to see what happens, though.
And on the other side of the house, what does the empire look like in 2 years ran by Empress Tash-Murkon?
So I've got a slightly contrary theory here, is that if Tash-Murkon becomes Empress, there's actually grounds for a souring of ties with the Caldari. because the Kaldari state, at least a number of the megacorporations, have fairly significant debts that they still owe the Amar Empire, and Tash-Murkon may call for those debts to be paid.
Very interesting. We do know that out of character, we know that they are working towards a 4-way war. So both of these people are interesting choices, and seeing where we're going to get to that, how we're going to get to that is going to be exciting.
The outlier for a Tash-Murkon victory is if CCP really wants to drive this kind of civil war Amar thing that they've been trying to do, it seems, just a feeling. There is a slight possibility that Ardishapur will not accept the Tash-Murkon Empress. Slight, and I wouldn't put my money on it, but it is a possibility that Tash-Murkon winning would trigger a Ardishapur secession. Very slight.
If we could guarantee something like that happening, if Canid had
if Canid
had succeeded, you would have seen a civil war, like pretty much no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
If Canid or Ardishapur had won, that would have been the nuclear option. Tash-Murkon is the only other choice that CCP really has. If they want to try and shoehorn that in, it would be kind of clumsy, but it could be kind of doable.
So if somebody does decide to invalidate Tash-Murkon's assumption, you would think that Canid would possibly back it, or not Canid. No. Canid would back it up as an opportunity to kind of throw another wrench and try to save himself.
No, because the person.
No, you don't. You don't think invalidating the entire trial wouldn't be valuable?
Well, first of all, there's no way to invalidate the trial. As soon as she wins, you can pretty much expect that all the heirs are going to die. So the people that would really oppose a Tash-Murkon Empress would be Ardishapur. And Ardishapur, the only person that hates Canid or Ardishapur, like Canid and Ardishapur hate each other more than Ardishapur would dislike Tash-Murkon being Empress. Like, there's no way that Ardishapur and Canid would ever work together on this issue. If it came down to Ardishapur helping Canid invalidate the trial so that Canid could get away with, like, Ardishapur would put a bullet in his own head just to keep that from happening.
I think there's a major issue though that it might not necessarily be civil war so much as a fracturing or just more turmoil. So having this theme of conservatives railing against Tash-Murkon, or trying to disobey the Empress's mandates, or at least interpret them in a selective way, that could be a thing. That could be a long-running story arc, and I would think fairly interesting for the Amar.
It definitely could. So I mean, like, it really depends on where CCP wants to go with this. We've seen CCP do kind of magician's choice in their lore a few times. So.
Well, either way, we are coming up to about halfway through our lore panel, and we have talked literally about one of our topics. So, unfortunately, I think we're going to have to package this back up and put it on the shelf for the next time, because obviously the MR trials are still going to be going on leading up until FanFest. So, thank you for guiding us through the different heirs and the potential futures of Amar.
Sorry for talking so much.
Oh, no, dude. That's exactly what we need. All right. So moving on is the Upwell Consortium. So since we talked last, we have a whole nother new organization to talk about. The Upwell Consortium was founded as being basically a collection of corporations throughout all of EVE Online. These are NPC corporations, not player corporations, and that their stated function is the construction of equipment for capsuleers, specifically the citadels. The idea is that they will be making more stuff afterwards to do the rest of the structures that we're supposed to be getting after Citadel. But this is the first big thing that's, citadels are coming, and these are the people that are making it. So, they've been in the news quite a bit. I'll go over some of the basics. First of all, their foundation is based on 6 different corporations, each of which kind of come from different places. There's 1 corporation per empire, and then there is the 2 controversial ones, which is Mordu Legion and this Intaki Bank. Since their founding, their chairman, Yanni, who is the former founder of Outer Ring Excavation, has used Upwell to buy out the shares that the Serpentis had purchased in YC 108 and reclaim Outer Ring Excavation as his own, and therefore has added it to Upwell. So now we have 7 corporations, the 6 original plus Or. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Anybody else want to chime in before I start asking specific questions?
Yeah. The Intaki Bank, I have to say, is a fun one, considering the Intaki Syndicate's ties with the Sisters.
Yeah, also, by the way, did you know that Poitat's the only named system in Syndicate?
So first of all, that's actually interesting. So we know of the Intaki as the Intaki Syndicate, but the Intaki is... The word Intaki predates the Syndicate, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the Intaki is just an area of space. And then, if I remember correctly, oh man, I was just reading this a little bit ago, that one of the groups was originally... I don't remember. Okay, so the Intaki Bank is well known for being kind of a mob bank. Is that a fair description?
I think that's fair, yeah. The Intaki are sort of a black market hub, that's say the Syndicate. So the Intaki Bank has probably questionable ties.
And based on the standings tree, they're actually in bed with the Serpentis and the cartel. They're part of the other trio. Because there's basically 2 pirate faction blocks by the NPC factions where they're kind of quote-unquote friendly to each other. There's the cartel, the Serpentis, and the Syndicate. And then on the other side, there's the Guristas, the Blood Raiders, and the Sancha.
Oh, yeah, that's what it is. Mordu Legion actually started out hanging out in the Intaki area a long time ago with the Washi Uprising, which, by the way, as a side note, for those of you who have not been paying attention, these skins, the new skins that are coming out across the board that are not just a house skin, a lot of those names are references to past events in the lore. The Rada Sunset, the Washki skins for the Legion, there's the new skins for Galente. All of those are locations or kind of triggers of past terms. So like the Rada Sunset was the name of the original Kaldari empire. Is that correct? Yeah. Ha! See, I know something. So anyway, yeah, all that aside, getting back to Upwell. Okay, so the Mordu Legion has strong connections with the Intaki Bank. Not only did they first start out in the Intaki area, but they help out the Intaki Bank sometimes, correct?
No, you're thinking of the actual Intaki, not the Syndicate. You have to remember that the Intaki are actually one of the biggest portions of the Federation. They're one of the primary bloodlines for players to pick from, and they have their own home system in Placid, which is where they all come from. As Tarek decided to point out on the Twitch chat, instead of being on the panel, you bad person, the Syndicate was founded by Intaki exiles from the Federation who opposed the original Kaldari Galente War. The Mordu's Legion was a bunch of Intaki expatriates in the state who signed up with a Kaldari commander as mercenaries.
And then because of some issues with the Intaki and Kaldari racial issues?
Yeah, it was racial issues.
Yeah, the Legion basically went third party after the conclusion of the war.
So, my question then is, like, we know why Upwell would go with Mordu Legion. Yanni has connection to Mordu because Mordu Legion was the security detachment for Outer Ring excavation prior to Serpentis' hostile takeover in YC-108. So my question then becomes, how did the Intaki Bank get involved? I thought that Mordu was connected to the Intaki Bank, which is why they were like, hey, by the way, you should probably totally use them as your bank. So why do we think Upwell is working with the Intaki Bank?
Well, I think there's a major element here that this is an extra-national group. It's not like Creolier, where it was founded by the Federation and the state acting as two state actors. It's rather an independent initiative of a consortium of otherwise actually fairly minor corporations. I mean, Uteria, Eifer, Kamaltech, Intaki Bank, Zoran Sons, these aren't the big names that have like Tech 2 ship lines associated with them or that type of thing.
No, but they are people who have had, we'll call it success in the last few years.
Oh, definitely so. But this is also sort of their way to put themselves in the big leagues. Like, think of these as the B-listers making themselves an A-list group.
So here's my question. Not knowing very much about the rivalries between the different organizations, you said that the Intaki and the Intaki Syndicate and the Serpentis are kind of friends. Is it at all possible that the Intaki Syndicate are helping fund Upwell, knowing that it is a strike against the Serpentis? Or do you think that this is just everyone who's smart knows that good money is on Capsuleers?
I'm more thinking that it's a case of they're looking at look at this from the perspective of like the stereotypical Swiss bank. Like it's an off the books bank, which is why they're using it. I don't know why they publicly involve it at that point, but it seems like it's an easy way to handle stuff without having Concord involved.
It seems to imply that the
Because
bank
it's
is
all-
an investor.
That's also possible because they would have a lot of money being that kind of outfit.
And it's also possible that Sylphia and Diablo has more direct ties with the Star Party running the Sisters of Eve, and not necessarily as directly with the Serpentis, even though they're sort of a troika.
All right. So that's actually an interesting question, because the Serpentis are, of course, connected to the Sisters of Eve through blood, but whether or not that relationship is friendly or not is not 100% clear. So let's go over some of these smaller corporations one at a time. You kind of touched on them a little bit. We'll see if we can suss out any information about them. So the first one is Yatiri, which is a Kaldari organization. Is there anything worth noting about them at all?
Not terribly much, excepting that their stations do have, I think, the Kalakiota skin, so while they're listed as being one of the first true independents, which is sort of rare in the Kaldari state because many of the corporations we know are subsidiaries of the Big Eight, because it's using the Kalakiota skin now, it may be that they've been acquired or that they have like mezzanine funding from one of the Big Eight.
All right, and then Eifer & Co. is the that's the Mimitar offering.
Yep, they're
And-
probably most well known for being the home of Dr. Tukos after he defected.
Right. So when Tukos decided to go all science-y on people and the Kaldari state didn't like them, he ran to Eifer & Co. for kind of like asylum. Why did they give, like, what is the Eifer & Co.'s shtick? Why would they accept Tukos, and what else is going on with them?
So they're a little bit on the shady side. They may or may not have been doing some booster research, and presumably, given the biotech ties and that their logo ended up on the Stratios, they have ties with the sisters. So Tukos, with his wormhole and biology focus, this might be a natural landing place for him.
And I would think that they would have accepted him just as they're not as antagonistic to the Kaldari, but anyway, to stick him in the eye, I would think.
All right, so Eifer & Co. is definitely not above being shady, or at least controversial. They are also on the Stratios hull, right?
That they are.
And then another one that's also on the strategy as whole would be Camel Tech. And that one, if I remember correctly, is actually fairly prominent. What do we know about the Camel Tech?
Aren't they primarily electronic warfare? But again, one of the smaller corporations?
I'm not 100% sure.
I'm bringing them up in game right now.
we definitely we should have had Ravas here.
Yeah. The line from in game is Kamal Tech is an established high tech company that was the forefront of electronic warfare technology a few decades back. Though the fortunes of the company have somewhat dimmed since then, it still cranks out top quality electronic warfare equipment.
There's a reason why I sort of refer to these corps as the B-listers.
No, it's a very interesting observation. So then on the Amar side, you have Zor and Sons, which I literally did not know existed. So they're just like just a manufacturing organization.
Yeah, pretty much.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
The only real fun thing about them is there's like a 35% share that's owned by Canid Innovation. Other than that, pretty typical Amar holder makes company, uses political connections to make it big. Incredibly boring.
And now they're part of Upwell.
Yep.
You had to get one Amar Corp on there somewhere, so pick one.
Right? I mean, they do have manufacturing interests, so presumably they'd be the ones who would be prototyping and manufacturing hulls, etc.
There's really nothing interesting about them. We can move on.
All right. Now, the last one that would be worth noting then is in one of the previous blogs, or news posts, I should say, the one that's labeled Upwell Consortium announced development of Citadel lines of stations for Capsuleer Market. At the very end, there's this throwaway that says, in related news, reports emerging from the ongoing negotiations between Upwell Consortium and Ducia Foundry suggest that the notorious Arkham mercenary group have been retained for the partnership of unspecified security tasks. Now, as we know, the Arkham become key pivotal people during the actual raid. But I think the addition of the Ducia Foundry is interesting. Do we know anything about that little group? I know I didn't put it in the notes, so you guys might not be prepared. But
it's no worry. My impression is that they had been a mining concern, and so it's interesting that you end up with some doubling up of ore in Ducia Foundry.
Yeah,
right.
They are a mining concern.
So Ducia Foundry is basically the Amar equivalent almost of ore, although slightly less successful. And actually, they have a partnership with Zor and Sons. So I just found it interesting that they would be connected to Arkhambine, which I guess we should probably jump into Arkhambine to kind of explain who they are as well. Tarek is pointing out in chat that Eifer is the direct competitor of Tukas's original employer, so that might be, they probably might have been trying to take secrets or something, and that Chemeltech are into cloning and implant technology.
It's worth noting that in the case of Eifer, Zainou Biotech had a major issue with his defection as it constituted theft of intellectual property, and so that was a major cause for antagonism over the course of that event arc.
Right. Okay, so now we have the second Amar organization who is dealing with... Oh, of course, because the Arkhambine troops that were involved in all of this were... there's very, very, very little information about Arkhambine. What we know is that they are disillusioned soldiers from early in the dust stuff. So chances are they're not crazy writing on wall blood, channeling sleeper type type dust soldiers, but possibly not too far removed from that.
Yeah, well, they're originally founded by first-generation dust soldiers that managed to escape the purges. I mean, that was some of the story there.
Oh, so these are the guys with the really crazy implants.
Yeah, that's supposed to be the foundation, and then they get progressively more dust soldiers from the second and later generations of clone soldiers.
All right, so Arkhambine is this group of almost like Merc dust soldiers that have kind of broken away. Clearly, they still have connections to the Ducia Foundry because Ducia Foundry was able to kind of negotiate this deal. Although I would say that probably Mordu's Legion and Arkhambine have a lot of common ground, and so negotiation wouldn't be too difficult between the two. Mordu's a cool guy. He's good with working with mercenaries.
That and Mordu's probably is heavily involved in Caldari Prime and doesn't have as much in terms of ground assets that they can deploy at the moment.
Right. All of his ground assets are currently already deployed. All right, well, and then, of course, they seized all of the Serpentis information, which I talked about earlier, but I want to definitely point out again because it's one of those points of confusion that a lot of people have not had, or that a lot of people have had, which is that the Serpentis actually basically hostile takeover bought out ore in YC 108. So that's 2005. 2006. So that means that since 2006, or as an organization, the people that make all of our mining stuff, the bowhead, all that stuff, is actually controlled by the Serpentis. So a lot of people were confused by that because it says, that they were taking them back from the Serpentis, and some people were like, I didn't know that it was ever taken by the Serpentis, and that's the reason why. Or has actually been owned and operated by the Serpentis for about 9 years now.
Yep, and I do wonder if that's one of the reasons why all of the various ore BPOs couldn't be acquired in Empire space, because they had to be off the books at least a little bit.
Well, also, there's the whole factor of it kind of was nice having something you did have to bootleg from the middle of nullsec back to Empire space.
So, and then the other thing that's worth noting about Upwell that I can think of is its tagline.
Oh, that tagline, yeah.
So
that's I can at least speak about that. The quote, for the tagline, Upwell has building dreams as its tagline, but that's also from the Citadel release tagline. A city made of dreams is built in heaven, which is from a quoted Jovian proverb, which is actually, I've always had that in my bio. I can't even find the source anymore, but that was it. It was a city made of wood is built in the forest. A city made of stone is built in the mountains. And a city made of dreams is built in heaven. So just the fact that it's Jovian is interesting. And if I remember correctly, that was something that was given out, it was on a plaque type thing for CCP members when they linked Dust and Eve, if I remember correctly.
That's my recollection as well, yeah.
But the message itself is interesting to hear.
Sorry. Yes, no, it's definitely a very on the nose reference, and it being used in Citadel is one thing, but it being used again in Upwell Consortium, it's one of those things that once is an accident, twice is a intentional.
Exactly, and that actually makes me wonder a little more about further stuff behind them, considering that is directly a Jove thing.
We will have to see as time goes on, but the other thing I really like is the new color scheme for the Frost or the Upwell Consortium. That white and blue, I think it looks really good. Which actually is interesting because it's the same kind of color scheme that you see on the Frostline stuff.
Well, for Frostline, it makes sense considering blue and white are considered cold colors, ice, etc., etc.
No, yeah, it makes total sense for it to be part of the or be the same color or It makes total sense for those to be the colors for Frostline. It's kind of interesting that, like, and I guess this bleeds a little bit into the next thing, which is the Operation Frostline stuff. But with the Operation Frostline story, one of the things that really bothers me is, like, who is dealing with these, or who's making these endurances, right? Because in essence, the endurance had to have been a project that was being operated by the Serpentis, but they have a very Upwell feel to them, even though Upwell basically just kind of took over at the last second and then started producing them. Like, that is the one kind of question that I have, which is like, who did the actual Operation Frost, or the Frostline line, and who can take credit for that?
Well, just because there's a hostile takeover by the Serpentis doesn't necessarily mean that they are deliberately going out of their way to do all these projects, because the people down the chain a bit may just be doing this normally. They may not necessarily have the Serpentis holding a gun to their head saying, build this, build that, design this, design that.
That's a really good point, because
the other thing is the color scheme, I think, is actually not it's not really a new thing, because if you look at, like, the Hephaestus outfits that we were given recently, there's 6 of them, and they have a bunch of different colors. Some of them have "or" written on them, and I believe those are the ones that are the yellow, white, and gray, the blue and white, and the green one. And, well, the green one we know is the Prospect. The yellow one goes with the Venture. So, I mean, kind of tells you what the blue and white one is going to be left over. So, since that was the ore one.
That makes sense. Also, it is worth noting that when they did the takeover, the actual people that work on the stations just kind of was like shrugged and was like, "Yay, new leadership." So you're right. It's just because the Serpentis owned ore doesn't mean Frostline was an ore, or sorry, it doesn't mean that the Frostline initiative was a Serpentis action. Although, to put my tinfoil hat on, I've been expounding the idea that the Frostline initiative was specifically designed to exploit the new shattered wormholes.
Oh yeah,
because the Serpentis is interested in drifter tech, which leads us to the drugs.
Yeah, another thing which ties into what I was saying about the Hephaestus outfits is that Ore as a faction is made up of 3 corporations: Outer Ring Development, Outer Ring Excavations, and Outer Ring Prospecting. Each of those has a different logo. Excavations is the same as the regular ore one, so it's kind of this yellow, brownish, bronzy color. Prospecting is prospect green, and Development is kind of a lighter blue shade. So these colors have been part of the ore collection for a while. So.
Very well. Maybe Jonas helped influence the colors of Upwell too, based on the colors that he liked from before. I don't know. Yanni, yes. There's Jonas, Ardishapur, and then Yanni such and such. So
R2 or something like that?
It's very difficult for me to... I'm already bad enough with names. All
Don't
right,
worry, one of them is dying, so...
That's fair.
Yeah, that won't be a problem for you after, like, April or May.
Happy people are dying. Okay, so anything else about Upwell that people want to touch on before we move on to Operation Frostline?
Are we waiting? Oh, no, Locke is back. We can actually talk about Frostline now.
Yeah, actually, okay, so why don't we take this as kind of the transition point between Upwell and Operation Frostline, and take this opportunity to show the latest scope video, which is the Operation Frostline scope video.
Still recovering from recent attacks, the Serpentis are given no quarter, as Mordu's Legion, on behalf of the Upwell Consortium, has just released the following message.
Capsuleers, Operation Frostline has been sanctioned. The Serpentis believe they could steal from us without retaliation. They were wrong. More Serpentis hideouts confirmed to be holding stolen goods are constantly being uncovered. If they have been discovered in your system, then their location will be displayed in your overview. The Operation Frostline targets have been designated as weapons-free combat zones against Serpentis assets. Be careful and be prepared. The Serpentis specialize in delivering thermal and kinetic damage, but they are also vulnerable to the same kind of damage, so fit your ships accordingly. As a token of our appreciation for your help in eradicating this nuisance, we, the Upwell Consortium, have agreed to regard any items retrieved as just reward for your efforts. Do your part in making New Eden a better world and kill them. Kill them all!
While most consider Operation Frostline an ingenious means for Upwell to deliver another blow against the Serpentis, there are those who have raised concerns about the sudden concentration of power building up behind the Upwell Consortium. This is Lena Amber, reporting for The Scope.
All right. So first of all, I'm going to shoot the elephant in the room by saying that I love these scope videos so much. They're amazing. They're great. But oh my gosh, Upwell, you need to fire your PR person and find somebody new.
So
That wasn't their PR person. That was the Mordu's Legion strike commander, Suni Aina.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
That's an actual event actor in game. I've had interactions with that event actor on Morwen.
Are they that off the chain usually?
No, because my interactions with them had to do with the Hearth and Home relief effort after Operation Highlander.
To be fair, Mordu's Legion in general can be a little off the chain in general.
That's
CCP
fair.
CCP has
Yeah,
good
let's be
writers
fair,
and good actors.
We do just,
I
voice acting's
Sometimes.
hit or miss
no,
sometimes.
I honestly, CCP has good writers and good actors, and I think this time they just wanted to dial up the cheese. Sometimes you just got to dial up the cheese, and I think that's what they wanted to do here.
Yeah, no, I honestly, I don't blame the voice actor. I honestly think that is what was supposed to be portrayed. Like, they do lose it. I prefer to look at it as kind of they are losing their kind of grasp of calm demeanor. I mean, this is the same group of people that simultaneously, like, just literally killed all of the Serpentis that they possibly could at their invasion. So, it may be intentional that they're showing their level of aggression instead of a professionalism that you would expect from a cluster-wide television broadcast.
Maybe, but I think the point can be made that line itself was just terrible. Like, it was, I mean, it's like you kind of have to pick and choose between stuff, and I think, that could have been perfect if not for that one line. It's that one line that's going to be taken out of context to mock the whole thing for years to come, like the bit about Sinosaural Fields.
Kill them all.
Everybody makes fun of that Sinosaural Fields line to the point that we have an in-game holiday gift item, that makes fun of it. So.
Yeah, but let's be honest, news commentators are stupid.
But this wasn't a news commentator. That's what I'm trying to say.
All I know is that I'm just going to start screaming, kill them all in like every single fleet battle that I'm in.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, so on from that. So I actually really like the video in the fact that it kind of talks about the RP, and actually watching it again right now because, I'm watching the stream, but the volume's off. So I got to watch the video with the volume off, and normally I'm focusing on what they're saying and I'm focusing on the ticker and all that stuff. But they've actually did an amazing job at like explaining the way that Frostline sites work via the visuals while the talking is going on. Like, they show there's frigates, there's cruisers, there's a battle cruiser. The battle cruiser is the target. Like I think they did a really good job with that. So, but before we can really go into Operation Frostline, we have to really touch on its progenitor, which is the Blood Harvest, right? So one of the things that CCP has really been trying to do is make sure that the lore is moving, right? That there's things happening. And one of the curious things that have been starting to happen is these what seems to be seasonally related events. So right around Halloween, we had the Blood Harvest. And now that we're close to Christmas, or the holidays, as it were, we have Operation Frostline. So
I just want to see the Greaster Bunny.
Yeah, no, the Garista's funny. Yeah. Well, I made the joke that the Christmas event should be Santa Claus, but Frostline works.
That the
funny
Santa
thing
Claus
is,
thing
we've
has
actually,
been the Santa Claus thing has been an ongoing joke among the players, and
Oh yeah,
they actually made a holiday item based on that.
well,
It'll be one of the new ones.
I think Sindel Pellion did the Sancha Baby song back near Incarna. I think that was Sindel, wasn't it? Anywho. Okay, so during both of these events, there's these sites that are throughout New Eden, including Wormhole Space, and there's basically some very limited PvE interaction. You must be this tall to ride this ride level of interaction with the PvE, but it's basically an opportunity to kind of keep people there as a sitting duck long enough to interact with one another, and then at the end of the prize. They've iterated on this. The significant difference between the two events is that the loot drops in Frostline is way more varied, and also you have to clear all of the rats on the inside instead of just blapping the primary and getting out. So at any rate, my question for you guys is, with the way that the lore is going, like the Crimson Harvest, you could almost argue the Blood Raiders would make it into an annual thing. But the Frostline event really does feel like something that's happening right now and won't happen next year. So if these are seasonal events, how do you see this kind of going on from here?
So I seem to recall, and you were at the same panel at EVE Vegas, that CCP Affinity had said that she and the group really enjoyed how the Blood Harvest event went, but they also didn't want to make things very specifically like a holiday event. So I think it's just more that they really like the mechanic for a way to get people into space, and that it's something that they can fairly rapidly set out there based on whatever the news is.
yeah. And besides, I mean, if they decided to do Santa Claus next year, let's face it, there's nothing they can do that will be worse than the current incursion content. There is literally nothing worse they can do than the Sancha incursion content that basically has not been touched, nor its storyline, in 5 or 6 years.
I mean, save for the Sancha stuff in the Shattered Wormholes sometimes, where you will suddenly encounter incursion rats in wormhole space and find Sancha sites, etc.
Have we actually figured out anything that we can do with that yet? I mean, there's
not really.
Sure, they're there, but there's we haven't really. People have been throwing, trying to interact with the stuff, since they found it in various different ways, and we've found nothing yet. So it's a question of, is it there and just for us to theory craft over and tinfoil over, or is there actually something that we're going to be able to do with this?
It could, honestly. We seriously might have missed something at some point. There might be something in just one specific system or something along those lines. Personally, I still love the Shattered Battleground site with, Revenant wrecks and Sleepers and Sancha wrecks everywhere, along with 2 unidentified wrecks, which, considering who came shortly after the Shattered Wormholes opened, might be the Drifters, which is just fun to see. I just want to find more about this stuff, and obviously, I'll keep looking. So, as should we all.
I think that's a pretty good opportunity for us to shift gears, and because we're coming up at about 30 minutes left, and we definitely want to be able to touch on the updates to Drifters. So we're just going to hop on straight over to there. So Drifters going on in the last 3 months. If you remember, last we had heard, literally the last lore panel was the day after Jamil Sarum died. 2 days after the lore panel, the Amar declared war on the Drifters, and it's been kind of touch and go. It seems like the player base is becoming more lukewarm on the subject of Drifters, especially given the technical difficulties that they've been having. So I know you guys have been very specialized or very focused on kind of the Drifter threat. So how has the last 3 months been?
I'll let Makoto start this one.
Yeah.
So from the technical side, it looks like implementing NPC versus NPC fighting has been challenging. Evidently, the AI has been described as temperamental at times. Flip side is that because this basically serves as an AI test and a rollout for a new style of incursion content, when it's been working, it's been pretty awesome. But it's also one of those things where it doesn't seem to take much to break it. And some tactics have been figured out, but that's not necessarily the focus of a lore panel, so we can skip over the tactics side of it. More interesting, though, is that there are still new developments that are being found with regard to the drifters. Both the items that have appeared on Singularity and then transitioned to Tranquility, which are the drifter boosters and coalesced elements, which we can go into more later, and also then a new area of the site that's still, frankly, fairly mysterious, which we just have been calling like the Space Urchin or the Anomaly.
Yeah, I'll start talking on that if you'd like.
Yeah, let's do Space Urchin first, then go into drugs, because Space Urchin is a bit more clear.
Yeah, I have something to say on both of those. But so as for the Urchin, if I remember correctly, it was Makoto who first saw it going to the.
Before you jump in too far, by the way, what you're looking at right now on the stream is in fact the Space Urchin as it was prior to not Frostline patch, but the one before that.
All right. So, Makoto, you were the one who found it in the first place, right?
Correct.
All right. So yeah, basically, within the Drifter wormhole sites, there was midway between the hive and the front room, which you could not access via any gate. We found it by mistake, slow boating. There used to be a pair of sleeper enclaves, which were most definitely there as a placeholder. So when they, on the updates page, said that new things will be happening in the Drifter sites, some of us thought, well, this might be the place it happens. So going back, Makoto found that. And as for the thing itself, seeing it in the game as it was then, it basically looked like a bunch of long spires in a concentric shape. But data mining, and actually these things were in the files for a while before we saw them live in game. There are 4 stages to this thing with these urchin-like arms, with the final stage being a Stargate. It is called in the files, it's a Jove gate, basically. And you can actually look at it on, let's see, Caldari Prime Pony Club. For like the ship viewer and everything, you can see it there, it's JBG4. And it's, well, quite decidedly a gate-like structure. Also, along with that, I did find a bunch of related sound files, including, gate jump sounds and all these other ambient things.
For those of you who are having a difficult time envisioning it, imagine if the point in which all of the urchin arms kind of meet is the central pivot point, and so instead of going out in all different directions, they kind of lined up in one direction. So there's a hole and a giant tunnel the length of these spindles.
Actually, there's a Minmatar Stargate that looks exactly like that, just has 4 arms branching out, but it has a long tunnel through which the Stargate stuff goes. That's basically what it is, only it's a lot longer.
It's about 200 kilometers long, a lot like the Jove observatories. If someone wants to link some images of it in the chat, that'd be great. But yeah. So as for the thing itself, it seems like there's, well, at the moment, it's just a bunch of little sticks, and around this thing, there is a massive spatial distortion on the top and bottom ends, which leads me to believe that these things were used once, and having used them, they then fell apart, and they're going to be put back together somehow.
Right.
Also, along with that, in the Drifter sites, well, no, we haven't encountered them yet, but in the files, for each Drifter site, name, there are 2 alignment units, 1 and 0. And we don't know what those will be yet, but considering some of the gate, what it looks like it's going to do, I'd say it's very likely to be related. Also to note, the Drifter, or the gate, uses the Drifter shader, which is, again, not something concrete, of course, but it's worth mentioning, especially because on one of the recent ops to the hives, I noticed it had its shader changed from the Drifter one to the Jove shader, which, well, the meaning of that means it wasn't the drifters who built it. It was probably there for a long time before that, meaning they could probably be, much older.
Right. And okay, so we found these sites. Well, Makoto found this site and started posting about it, people going there. They found it both on Tranquility and on Singularity. However, as I said, that this is how it looked as of a month ago. So a month ago, they released it, and they made 2 significant changes to the site. Correct me if I'm wrong. The first significant change was that they actually put in an acceleration gate that led to the site. And second of all, they changed its configuration. So now it looks not like it's well formed.
Yeah, so
basically, it looks like...
We call it pickup sticks for a reason.
Basically, at this point, it looks like, imagine it's spinning, and imagine everything started falling off. It looks like everything's spun out. Like, imagine kind of like a galaxy.
Yeah, it takes the sticks, and it scatters them across a sine curve in space.
It also renamed them to massive debris.
Well, actually, to note, that's actually a separate large collidable object. Those also existed in the files for a while, but they weren't seen anywhere until they replaced the gate structure itself.
Interesting. And then the final piece of really exciting stuff when it comes to this sort of gate information was that once it was out for about a week on Tranquility in the current state, in the pickup stick state, now.eveonline.com, which is their Tumblr where they leak a bunch of stuff, they posted a picture of this serpentine destruction, but a very wily and sharp-eyed person noticed that it was actually in Empire space. It was in K space, not in wormhole space, which we would be expected.
We actually managed to track it down to the exact system the screenshot would have been taken from, and we didn't find anything, but it's meaningful nevertheless, because
it's
this
in
thing
Minmatar
appeared
space.
In Minmatar space. What was the system? It started with an M.
Malukar.
Was it Malukar?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
in Hamatar, and well, maybe in upcoming releases we'll see more things appear in K-space, because the implications of that would be pretty awesome on their own, and just the fact that it was posted on Eve now means that it definitely is something significant.
Right. So yeah, we did it, by the way, through using the nebulas that you could see in the background, and then finally we zeroed in on the actual system by
looking at the
star pattern, the star pattern in the sky. So it was kind of an exciting afternoon.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, though it's worth noting that the star pattern, there's a small change that we realized match with Singularity. And at the point that we were looking at it on Tranquility, it simply wasn't there. My guess, though, is that this screenshot had been taken possibly from Chaos or from another internal server, considering that we still haven't found it even on Singularity.
It's funny, because we got it down to the planet even, which I think just demonstrates how gigantic nerds we are.
Well, let's not go into reversing voice records.
Oh wow, that, yeah. Speaking, yeah, just to explain that, when I found the Drifter Gate sounds, I also found things labeled Drifter Voice, which, by the way, have been renamed to Unknown Voice, or something along those lines. But yeah, actually, if someone wants to link my SoundCloud in the chat, people can see the sounds themselves. I also took out the Drifter Doomsday sound for your listening pleasure.
I think they may have actually updated the Drifter Doomsday sound. At least that's my impression from having been blown up by the damn things 3 or 4 times in the last 2 weeks. They really, really love me on our consortium ops. Makoto will back me up on this. I died between 2 or 3 times in every op. We're actually starting to have bets among the coordinators how many times I'm going to die on an op.
What's not to love about you, Morwen? Come on now.
I know, right?
All right, so let's jump over to the drifter boosters.
All right,
Who wants to take this one?
I can. Unless someone else wants to say something first.
Nope, you're the dirty data miner. You go.
Alrighty. So these things, well, we're calling them drifter boosters at this point, but they appeared a while ago on Singularity, and they are actually currently in a finished state on Tranquility. They're still unpublished, so you're not going to be able to link them or anything. They're called Antipharmacon, and, well, basically they seem to operate similar to boosters, looking at their description. But they're not boosters, they're some sort of drifter thing. And they basically coincide with 5 different normal booster types. Now, the interesting thing about them, though, is it notes their quantum properties in their description, and something specific that we've seen before related to that was in the chronicle Inferno from the Inferno release, where they found some strange, basically folded within itself, quantum computer type thing almost. Someone can correct me if you want to say it, but basically they used it as a drug, and it is literally what allowed people to make all the Inferno modules we see now, the micro jump drive, the ancillary modules. It basically interacted with their minds, and it ended up overheating it, which also they called Inferno. And the thing itself, they called it Inferno. They found it in wormhole space in old Talocan shipwrecks, which lends itself even more strongly to what the heck the drifter things are. So looking at them, I mean, you might not want to use them if you fear for your mind, I guess, but we'll see what happens once we find them. They also have really cool looking icons. I'll say that. Makoto, did you want to say something?
I think it's mostly been covered. The tie-in with Inferno is definitely a fun one, and that these do look to be drifter drugs, which, at this point we've got drifters using a booster effectively that ties with a Talocan creation, a mathematical symbol as their icon, and they evidently are really into spatial manipulation. So dominant theory is basically that the drifters are the Talocan returned.
Well, it's one of them, but I'm not going to get into that again. Anyhow.
Oh, good. Yet another theory about the drifters.
Yeah, let's not get... We had an entire panel on that, so I'll talk about that somewhere else. Now, So,
I do want to point out, I don't know if you got into this, but the drifter boosters have no drawbacks. No mechanical drawbacks.
Yep, they're a solid 8% boost to their stat with 0 drawback. So it seems they're pretty nice.
So, with all of this probably going to be relevant relatively soon, and Serpentis in the news with a bunch of stolen information, do you think that it's possible that the Serpentis are going to be involved in this booster?
I think that if it ends up happening, a player could easily try to get them involved, and CCP might want to get them involved somehow, considering they really are the number one when it comes to any sort of booster-related thing in New Eden. But I guess we'll just have to see.
It's also worth noting that there are new Hive-related vault structures in the data files that we haven't seen yet, the Hive repositories. So it could very easily be that we will instead trade indexes or something else for whatever.
For the
funny thing is we also found a thing in one of the Hive sites on our way in the antechamber, I think, on one of the ops that was a new object in space. It was it one of the sleeper linkage structures, or Talocan linkage structures or something?
Yeah.
We saw. It was new, but it wasn't interactable with. It wasn't like a hacking container just using that model or anything, but it just randomly appeared. So I don't think we're back. I don't think we're back at that one in the consortium op chain, but obviously when we do find it again, we will be taking another hard look at it.
And it looks like Lockfox finally successfully finished a Frostline site, which means it's about time to wrap things up.
He's finished several.
Well, he actually got loot from one now.
Oh.
So I've put out a request for final questions. We'll switch up. I'm going to let this topic keep going for a few more minutes, and then we'll switch to the final questions. Go on.
All right, because I was just going to say we skipped over the coalesced element.
Yep.
Yeah. That thing, basically, again, it was another thing that appeared on, Chaos, actually, from data trawling that a dear friend did before he stopped. It is a amalgamation of all 6 elements that we've seen so far. Now, when I say 6, I mean the 5 drifter elements along with the Antikythera element, as can actually be seen in its icon if you look closely. And it actually has a blueprint too, which it's a blueprint that needs one of each element, and it makes a coalesced element. We literally have no idea what it's going to do. But when it appears, and I'm sure it actually will be soon, considering it's already live. Well, again, it's unpublished, but the item in itself is totally finished with an icon and everything on Tranquility. Yeah, that. I'm imagining it might be involved. I mean, maybe, possibly, with something to do with the Citadels. I certainly wouldn't expect it to be something you need to build them, because it's, at this point, it's so complicated to even get the stuff related to it. But maybe it'll be related to more Drifter stuff. Well, obviously it's related to that, but like has been said before, the possibility of Drifter stuff becoming more in the know for us, it's obviously, my hope that thing might be related to that.
My tinfoil personally is that it's in the files because they want it to come out during this release cycle. They're not quite ready for it, so therefore it wasn't in the patch notes. But what they're going to do is throughout the Operation Frostline events, as the story continues to go over the next couple of weeks, they'll lead into it being a thing.
Well, we don't necessarily know if it's tied to Frostline or not. We do know that there are 5 of the drugs. There are 5 hives. There are 5 elements. There are 5 indexes.
Right. No, I'm not saying that it has to be, but I'm saying like this could potentially be an alternate way of releasing things where it's not actually part of a patch. They put it in during the patch, but then they unlock it through some event as it's occurring throughout the game.
I could see that happening. Yeah.
Yeah. The Frostline sites do actually drop blueprint copies for the Endurance. You don't have to go and just invent them straight from a venture blueprint. Although that's probably the faster way to do it, because you will occasionally, very rarely, find things like blueprint copies or Plex. Damn you, Uriel.
Yeah, I can actually confirm that. Yeah, people have been saying stuff about that, and no one was really sure if it was real or not. But yeah, I did get a drop of 1 Plex from a Frostline site in a wormhole. That was a nice little surprise.
Neat.
Random aside. On the updates.eveonline.com page, the Mysterious Happenings and Drifter Sites header is listed as being part of upcoming and winter.
Yep.
At the top it says winter 2015, but my guess is that considering that winter doesn't properly start until December, that we have yet to see the full evolution of the anomaly zone in the Drifter Hive, and that over the course of January or February or March, we will see many more interesting things there.
Yeah, taking off my lore hat for a second and just putting on my software development business hat for a second, I would not be surprised if they're not waiting. Like they've put a major slowdown on the Drifter developments because they're trying to straighten out the AI. I imagine that once we get a stable build of the AI that's working and is nice, then we will start seeing the acceleration of these events again. Like they're keeping it going in order to keep things interesting, but I'm sure that the AI holdbacks have been, altering their timelines.
Agreed on that.
Anywho, anything else before we move on to questions and final thoughts? Anything else about the Drifters?
Just a personal hope/thought. I would think they're going to become a little more prominent when it comes to actual things happening sometime. Not actual things, lore-related things, because their silent threat. It's always been, nice and a little threatening, but it does make them seem a little stagnant when literally the only thing they do is shoot.
I personally stand by the fact that the Drifters are not our enemies and we are making them our enemies.
Yeah, I think that also. I don't think they came intending for us to be enemies, but we're in the way.
They pushed the wrong buttons.
They killed Jamil. They have to die.
Thanks, Makoto.
Hey!
Still related to that,
I totally
actually.
blame Lucas.
We
so
really should
actually-
be blaming Lucas here.
Yeah, if I can
Or
actually mention
alternatively
something
to
related
those.
to Jamil real quick. There seems to be that we might end up seeing with the Society of Conscious Thought Chronicle that hopefully comes out sometime. I'm really excited for that. That might reveal a little more about what happened with Jamil, considering, well, who scanned her a little while before she ended up getting blown to smithereens.
We have not forgotten about him. He's still on our kill on sight list when we see him again.
Well, he didn't do anything. He just entosted her.
And then she died.
Yeah. Anyway, I think my only final note on Drifters is that we do have like weekly hive ops as part of the consortium, the non-Upwell consortium. So if you're interested, you should probably hop on when we're doing them, and we'll grab you for that because we would love more people.
Yeah,
can confirm that those are a fun time.
So basically every week they go off on a big excursion to go check out the hives, and for some people it's experimentation, for other people it's sightseeing. But do you guys have a channel, or how do people get involved with that if they want to?
In game, the channel is Consortium Operations. Yeah, check it out. Join us. At the very least, it's entertaining to go once so that you can see the hive and the anomaly, which are extremely pretty.
So my question is, how much standings do I lose with Drifters by going? Will I become shoot on sight for them if I go on one of these?
So this is going a bit more into the mechanics, but a couple of strange things. So the Drifter hives, most of the rats you encounter are generic sleeper drones, but you do take Drifter standing hits when you kill them. That said, at present, the Drifters don't seem to really care if you're neg 10, at least not in K-Space.
In K-Space, they don't give a shit, really. I'm sorry, but they don't care if what your standings are with them in K-Space unless you shoot them first. In the hives, they are full aggressive. Like at the observatories and the unidentified wormhole sites in K-Space, they are aggressive. But outside of that, they really don't. They look at you and they're like, oh, okay, another little thing flying around, whatever. I'm going to go back to scanning the station and seeing if there's anything interesting, and even though I've scanned it 500 times already.
Yeah, basically, if you don't touch their stuff, they don't mind you.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so couple of questions, quick answers. There's an increase in hive wormholes. Do you guys have any thoughts about that? It was in the patch notes.
It makes it easier for us to get in and out because like we were having maybe one or two high sec entrances for our fleets, and now I think for yesterday's op we had like 7 different options we could do all in high sec.
So you're suggesting it's just a mechanical decision, not a lore decision?
It could be a lore decision that they're using them just to fly around, but it in terms of the mechanics end of it, it basically is there are more entrances to these wormholes.
Mechanically more entrances. Lore-wise, though, it does increase the penetration of Drifter battleships in all types of space.
Yes.
We went from, originally 25 systems where Drifter battleships were spawning in pairs to, at this point, about 100.
Yeah.
All right, and I guess that about wraps it up. I don't see any other questions besides there's one about increase of ships and systems with observatories, but I think you just kind of touched on that the Drifters are just becoming more and more present within EVE. All right, so I guess that about wraps up all of our stuff for this week. We have 4 minutes, so going down the list in order, we're going to have final thoughts. So we're going to start with Makoto.
Final thoughts. Drifters are fun, and I totally want to go to Jove space and be one of the ones to colonize it with citadels and player-built stargates and observatories. That'll be a fun time, even if it's years in coming.
Very nice. Uriel.
I'm just looking forward to the Society of Conscious Thought Chronicle, and I will never give up hope that I'll eventually be able to fly a Drifter battleship because it's one of my favorite looking hulls in the entire game.
Mark, I have a question from Lucas, which is why don't you love him?
I always love Lucas, even if I show my affection through making fun of people, so. But my final thought is basically I'm looking forward to starting to get some answers exactly on how everything fits together, especially on the Drifter side of things, kind of fleshing out where they came from and exactly what their connection is. So here's hoping.
Mark or Elizabeth?
My final thought is I'm just waiting to see what CCP brings us for Christmas this year.
Yay, Christmas. Morwen.
I'm looking forward to seeing some more, loose ends being tied up. Not necessarily with a nice red bow, but kind of cleared up for us to know what's going on, because we've been getting a lot of things that leave more questions than answers of late, and it would be nice to have some of those older things back to just having answers so we can move on to the next thing.
Very cool. My final thought is that EVE more and more in the last couple of years have kind of taken this focus away from Psychopath Simulator to largest living sci-fi universe. And more that I read about it and see it in the news and all that stuff, I'm proud to be part of it. This stuff that's happening in the lore, regardless of whether or not you're paying attention to it, it kind of matters to you. Even if you don't think you're RPing, by merely existing in this game, you are in fact taking on a role. Even if that role is pirate or uncaring Empyrean or drifter scientist, like whatever role you take on within this universe is in fact your role within this sci-fi opera that continues to play out. So I really like the way that things have been going. And I hope that we as a community can continue to assess and assimilate the changes that are kind of happening to the bedrock of EVE Online. And we will be here to continue to try to put that into context for you. As a final note, I would always, I'd love to thank our sponsors on Patreon. If you want to get a hold of us or correct us or tell us anything, or if you're interested in helping out, go ahead and give us an email at hydrostaticeve@gmail.com. You can message me directly at Ashrathi. You can message, Lockfox is at HLib Industries. Makoto Priano is at Makoto, right?
At Makoto Priano, yep.
There you go. And then there's Uriel. What's your Twitter?
At my last name. It's such a long name. At Anteovnuecci.
Mark is at Web Spaceships. Elizabeth is at Elizabeth, I think, right?
At Elizabeth VEA.
There you go. And at Morwen Lagann.
Yep.
Alternatively, all of us hang out in the Tweetfleet Slack. There are invites available for everyone. Come hang out with us and, show off your tinfoil knowledge. And yeah, please continue to take part in this game, and however you do as we move on to the future. So on that note, on behalf of Lockfox, Fyridian, myself, and all of our wonderful panel, thank you for listening to this Frostline lore panel. And remember, it's not how much SP you have, it's what you know.